Good morning, everyone. It's a fresh new week, so we start off this Monday with 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversation. I'm Ini John Mekwa, and we start as usual with what's going on in the global oil space. We see this morning that prices rose after U.S. and Chinese economic officials sketched out a trade deal framework, easing fears that tariffs and export curbs between the two world's two top oil consumers could dent global economic growth. So I'm looking at the numbers this morning. It's green that we see. For Brent, it's up almost 0.5%, 0.42%, $66.22 a barrel. WTI is also up 0.39%, $61.74 a barrel. And we know it was a very volatile week last week for oil because of trade tariffs and meetings cancelled and all. So U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that U.S. and Chinese officials, they've hashed out a very substantial framework for a trade deal, which could allow President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping to discuss trade cooperation this week. I believe that's slated for Thursday. And Trump has also said that he's optimistic about reaching an agreement with Beijing, expected to hold that between those two leaders. A look at the market's performance last week. It was a very positive one. Overall, we saw there almost 5%, up 4.48% at the close of trade on Friday. That's the accumulation of the weekly activity. And we saw the oil share had gone up to 155,645.05. Equity cap, good, 98.79. Hopefully we will hit 99 at least trillion before the close of trade today. For the sectors, banking has been the laggard out of all the sectors. Very unlike that, the most liquid counter, which most of the time moves the market. We saw a lot of profit taking going on there. I guess accumulated profits over time, and investors have decided to take their profits at this time. Consumer goods was really good. Dangote Sugar was a major driver. And then here we have Dangote Cement. Almost all through the week, Dangote Cement was the major trade mover for last week. So Dangote Cement probably has about more than 5% contributed to this 10% we saw up for industrial good. Insurance has lost some of the taste that it's accumulated with all of the reforms going on around insurance. Well, I guess investors have gotten used to it, so it's not as exciting as it was when it started. So we saw insurance there in the red. Oil and gas, Aradel and O&O. Aradel, I believe, has some acquisition that came up. The news came up last week, so that made it very attractive to investors and contributed a whole lot to that. And top gainers for the week, ASO Savings and Loans, and yes, Aradel. We see the Unicel Interlinked PLC also led that. For the top losers, Living Trust Mortgage Bank, Julie PLC, and Realty Briscoe were the top losers. Top trades, Fidelity Bank, Japan Gold and Ventures, and Access Holdings. Access Holdings, I believe they do have their results out. We would try to dissect some of the details tomorrow, talking about Access Holdings. Now to other stories. The organized private sector of Nigeria, the OPS, they've opposed the Senate's proposal to amend the Nigeria Social Insurance Trust Fund. That's the NSITF Act. In a letter to the Senate President, the 5-member organizations are asking the Senate to immediately halt the legislative process, which has already passed second reading, insisting that the proposed changes would undermine the NSITF's tripartite structure and violate international labor standards. The body warns that the NSITF Act amendment threatens transparency, accountability, and the very foundation of the fund's governance structure. The proposed amendment seeks to reduce the representation and influence of employers and workers who are the main contributors and beneficiaries of the fund, while increasing government control through political appointments. And economic think tank, the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, CPPE, they've recommended strong legislative support and institutional backing for the federal government's proposed Nigeria First policy. In a statement signed by the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Muda Yusuf, the CPPE describes the policy as a bold and transformative initiative that could reposition the Nigerian economy in its quest for sustainable growth, self-reliance and inclusive development. The CPPE emphasizes that at this pivotal moment in its economic development journey, Nigeria must adopt a deliberate strategy that prioritizes domestic production, value addition and local participation across all sectors of the economy. The think tank notes that the policy seeks to address the country's long-standing structural vulnerabilities, such as heavy dependence on imports, weak manufacturing capacity, and foreign exchange instability. All right, so now we're also having a lot of conversations around how to maximize the resources on the continent, not just in Nigeria, but doing this through leadership. And so we've had a couple of conferences, leadership conferences, that are supposed to take care of this.
This Business Leaders Roundtable is set out to be an exclusive earning event for founders and executives. The meeting is focusing on surviving and thriving in the next decade.
How do we move from where we are to where we need to be? Having promised every other person, as an entrepreneur, you've promised your investors return on investment, you've promised your employees salary at the end of the day, at the end of the month, you've promised your customers satisfaction, all right, in terms of delivery of your services and products. You've promised who else? The government that you will abide to all with all regulations, and you will pay your taxes and your obligations. Having promised every other person everything, and they are almost certain they will get whatever it is that you've promised them. The question is, what's left for you? Who makes a promise to you? All right.
One of the objectives is to share tips that will reduce the burden of leadership and increase the prospect of profitability.
That is the benchmark. I also will look for a land in that area and start my business. You may not be working from the same perspectives because she has different resources that you don't have, right? But sometimes people take loans to replicate the strategy of another business, right? So the best route is what? It depends on what the available means. The resources available to you, right? The capital you have, the human resources you have, right? And remember, like I said earlier, it's not always cash.
Even when you're employing HR people, look for people who are data-driven, right? HR has moved from just, you know what, you're not feeling too good. Hey, sorry, do what? No. It's how does data affect business decision, and how do we use people to actually do all of this? So the landscape has changed. I'm glad we're in this environment currently, and the world has really changed from HR just being a feel-good aspect of the business.
The leaders leave empowered and also with a promise to share knowledge gained.
Well, let's look at Nigeria's trade status this morning. It's supposed to be one of the major sources of inflow of revenue for the country, non-oil exports. And they say there's been improvement, but let's find out firsthand also. But let's see where those improvements are. We see them in the data. In 2024, Nigeria's foreign trade volume was shaped by volatile reforms. And of course, we know President Tinubu came with a lot of reforms which affect everything. And so in that year, that's 2024, the balance of trade payment surplus was at 6.83 billion, a goods trade surplus of $13.17 billion, improvement from the previous year, 2023. When it comes to exports, crude oil drove overall as usual. Our total export for the second quarter was valued at 19.43 trillion. That's more than 200% increase from what it was the same period in 2023. So that's another improvement. The record trade volume, we see total foreign trade volume for 2024 was at 138 trillion. That's more than 100% increase from what it was in 2023, I guess Nigeria is doing something right. Nigeria's export sector remains heavily dominated by mineral fields, but agricultural products and minerals and some manufactured goods also contributed significantly. And of course, we're talking about value addition. And I'm glad that the new president of Afrexim Bank, Dr. George Elomi, has promised that he's going to put an end to raw materials exports on the continent. We hope that will also drive down to what's going on in Nigeria. We see top export commodities. It is more than 86%, almost 87% was crude petroleum, and then petroleum gas. And then you have cocoa beans, mostly unprocessed fertilizers, oilseed nuts, and fruit. So let's find out if this good news in the numbers actually meant good news in 2024, and if we are improving on that in 2025. And we're doing that with the president of Nigeria Trade and Investment Center Canada Incorporated, Mr. Femi Boyede, joins us from. Good morning, Mr. Boyede. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Great. So I hope that you heard some of those numbers showing an improvement between 2023 and 2024. Of course, we're still in 2025, so we don't have the numbers yet. But in your interactions in the trade scene in Nigeria, have you also noticed this significant increase of trade exports, non-oil exports especially, between 2023 and 2024? And would you say we're on the same trend for 2025?
Certainly. I'll give an affirmative yes to that. Trade volumes and non-oil export receipts are definitely growing. But then
Okay, looks like we're having a bit of a technical issue there. Looks like Mr. Boyede cannot hear me. So let's just take a report while we try to fix that. My colleagues are working on that behind the scenes, so we hope that that can be dealt with. Okay. So I wanted to call for a leadership conference, but let's just take a short break and perhaps see those numbers again. And hopefully it will be fixed. The technical hitch will be fixed, and we'll speak to Mr. Boyede later. Please stay with us. You're welcome back, and I do hope that Mr. Boyede can hear me now. Mr. Boyede, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Awesome. So I was asking if following the numbers that show improvement, in some cases more than 200% between 2023 and 2024, talking about trade data, if you have seen that trend in practical, and if you think we're on the trend to also have an improvement in 2025?
Yes, and I was saying that my answer to that is an affirmative yes. As we see from the data you have provided, trade volumes and non-oil export receipts are certainly growing. And of course, we can point at several actions and would I say strategies of the current administration that definitely have impacted this. I'm talking about the incessant efforts of Mr. President to market Nigeria, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduole. You'll see positioning Nigeria as digital trade champions for Africa, the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, the creation by the, I believe, the Ministry of Finance, Central Bank of the MOFI, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, which also went further to create the Nigeria Credit Guarantee Company, of course, which now provides going forward a comfort for banks lending to small and medium scale exporters. All these, of course, are coming together to ensure that, like I would say, Nigeria has now put her feet on the right track towards becoming a non-oil export-driven economy.
But a lot of people say that we are not even hitting the mark. We are not even scratching on the surface, because when you look at some of those things that we export, especially things like cocoa, its value hasn't been added, and we're still struggling with that. Cottages in the country are struggling to come up, to survive, and these are the arms that should add value. So we're exporting more of raw materials, which is also depriving us of a lot of revenue.
Yes and no. Yes, because the blatant reality facing us is the absence of processing equipment to add the value. I'm not too sure of how much farm gate processing goes on in Nigeria. All we are seeing is agencies of government, for example, the Raw Materials Research and Development Council, going to the National Assembly to enact a law that you can no longer export commodities out of Nigeria unless you process up to 30% value addition. We are seeing agencies like NAFDAC going to the same National Assembly to secure the enactment of a bill to say that you cannot export unless you get an export license from NAFDAC and all of those. Yes, but must we, because of all of these present challenges, say that we are actually not doing anything? The truth is that there is growth, and in the areas of commodities like cocoa, like cashew, unfortunately, like Shea nut butter, where Nigeria is rated as the largest producer, but probably the lowest exporter of value addition. What these challenges should get us doing is actually to look at what next we need to do to actually hit the potential that Nigeria does have. About 8-9 months back, I did a presentation, and the research leading to that presentation showed that Nigeria is top producer of about 15 different agricultural commodities. And in the world ranking of world traders in these commodities, Nigeria hardly featured in any at all, which means that other countries are taking these commodities in their raw form from Nigeria, adding value, and then becoming the exporter of note. So like I said, this is an obvious challenge. What do you do with a challenge? It is time to create prosperity from adversity. And the only way we can do that is, now that we have identified, then, of course, because Nigeria remains a government-led economy, it behoves of government to actually begin to put the right actions and activities, programs and projects in place to ensure that we actually begin to add value. It's not enough to enact the policy. We must find out how ready are Nigerian exporters, especially the micro, small, and medium scale exporters. How equipped are they? What's their export readiness capacity to meet the international standards required? If not, even the little that we're doing now, we risk losing out.
So that's, I mean, it looks like that's one of the challenges we have. So even when solutions are preferred, sometimes it comes across as if it's not well thought out. because it now has consequences. For instance, you talked about how the research agency or council, they've gone to get a law that compels the addition of value before exports. And then we saw the ban on the export of shea nuts. And we have heard two sides of the story in both cases. Are the industries here ready? Do they have the capacity to add value? Now, on this other hand, the shea nuts, there are also people who say that some people have been left unemployed and their sources of livelihood has been taken from them because of this ban. So I wonder how we can find a balance even when there's a proposed solution. Is it that enough people are not being consulted, enough of the stakeholders are not being consulted before these solutions are pushed out there? That's why when they are pushed out there, we always see both sides, hitting their heads instead of a solution that moves everybody forward.
Yes, you hit the nail right on the head. Policies here tend to be churned out without adequate stakeholder consultation. And as far back as 2001, I was privileged to be one of the technical team that developed the, the template for the creation of national export strategies around the world. So call it a global template. And the first condition is it must be bottom-up, stakeholder consultation. Find out how where you are going is going to affect the people who are there right now. Make sure that there is a buy-in to the policy that you are about to promulgate before you even release it out. So what has been happening here is probably that we are putting the cart before the horse, and we sit down, bring out the numbers. If we are exporting, we are adding 30% value, we are going to be earning 50% more in terms of forex and all of this, and we use this to produce beautiful memoranda, take them to National Assembly or to Federal Executive Council. They look at what the possibilities are in terms of income, revenue. But nobody has asked the people, the players in that particular sector or industry, what challenges are there? Can we remove them before we begin to launch out these strategies? And now that we have identified weak stakeholder consultation, I believe that again, bringing prosperity from adversity is a lesson learned, and I hope it has been learned across board, across the ministries, departments, and agencies, that we cannot just bring out policies overnight. Let me talk briefly about the shea nut butter ban. Now, as not only an export consultant, but having been an export manager as well as an importer myself, that's why we have the Nigeria Trade and Investment Center, Canada Incorporated. I do know, for example, for a fact, that for commodities like shea nut, shea butter, the contracts are forward. That's what you call them, forward contracts. So the Nigerian exporters of shea butter obviously had, like 1 year ahead, have entered into international supply contract against the harvest season of 2025, for example. And international export contracts are governed by international arbitration, where default implies very heavy penalties. I am not too sure how many of the exporters who have export supply contracts in their hands were consulted before the policy came. I'm not sure if the federal government has a basket of support for the penalties these guys are going to incur when the people they signed the contracts with begin to invoke the international arbitration clauses that are in the export contracts. So this is the reason why stakeholder consultation is very imperative in the formulation of policies. Otherwise, we are going to continue to have policy somersaults, policy inconsistencies, and that's going to affect the credibility of the Nigerian exporter. So these things don't work in silos. If we cannot secure and sustain the trust of our international trading partners, then export volumes, I'm afraid, it's good that we're beating our chest that they are growing now. They risk beginning to decline.
Yeah, that's sad. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not just in trade. We've had stories like this. You know, it's also happened in other sectors. But you are the president of the Nigeria-Canada Investment Center.
Nigeria Trade and Investment Center.
Nigeria Trade and Investment Center, Canada Incorporated. That means that you're bringing Nigeria and Canada investment and investors together. Last week, I know you were also a part of a meeting with the Nordics also. So we see all these Western countries picking interest in Nigeria. But I think at the heart of it is the question of how much benefit does Nigeria get from all of this? You know, we're partnering China, we're partnering Canada, we're partnering. How much of it, how much of Nigeria's non-oil exports actually gets to those people?
Yeah, again, coming from your intro report, the numbers are growing. The good thing, the exciting thing is that there is more interest being shown in Nigeria. So now is the time for us to actually put out there what the comparative and competitive advantages that Nigeria has. As of this moment, if our trade, I believe the EU still remains one of Nigeria's biggest trading partners. And I believe that it's in products like cocoa butter, cocoa liquor, cocoa powder, and stuff like that. So I do not agree that all Nigeria's cocoa is being exported in the raw. No, that's far from the truth. But what the point I'm trying to outline and highlight here is the fact that the Nigeria can become an industrial outpost for the European companies importing Nigeria's cocoa to fabricate chocolate. Nigeria can become an industrial outpost for Vietnamese companies that are importing raw cashew nuts here and becoming net exporters of processed cashew nuts in snacks. Nigeria can become an industrial outpost for American and North American, including Canadian companies that now need to satisfy the culturally diversified populations that are growing by the day in the areas of processed foods, in culture, exotic fashion, and all of those. How we do this is now what Nigeria needs to come in to do. Interagency collaboration, for example, between the Nigerian Customs Service and the Canada Border Services Agency will definitely open the the Canadian market for Nigeria's exports. The current situation is that the importers of Nigerian goods, especially processed foods, into Canada are doing that because Canada, the Canadian Border Services Agency looks at us as friends. And because of that, they most times overlook what they are supposed to implement. If you must bring yam tubers into Canada, for example, you will not be allowed if the yam tubers are stated as originating from Nigeria. But the same yam tubers come into Canada if they are in cartons, labeled fresh yam, produce of Canada. So interagency collaboration will solve this. Standards Organization of Nigeria can come into interagency collaboration agreement, for example, with the Canada Food Inspection Agency, in such a way that CFIA actually understands what the standards are that when they are leaving Nigeria. And because this has become an issue of interagency mutual agreement, it makes it easier for Nigeria's products to enter those markets. For the Nordic countries, where the Nordic Nigeria Connect last week, there is such a vibrant, enthusiastic expression of interest in continuing to partner with Nigeria. So if we're looking at green energy, we're looking at digital trade, we're looking at... so now is actually the time for Nigeria to develop new trading partners, new friends. And in doing that, Nigeria must first and foremost know what it is that she wants out of these partnerships. Yeah. We don't go into the partnerships because they have... Because
we're excited about the partner.
What is the level of interest?
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Femi Boyede. For that, we do hope that individuals like yourself who have the ears of the government and the ears of the diaspora, will help us push such conversation, how we should be intentional about what we want from every relationship and not just dive into it out of excitement. President, Nigeria Trade and Investment Center, Canada Incorporated, Mr. Boyede, thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you so much.
All right, now the Africa Future Leadership Conference has been held in Lagos. It had the theme, Towards a Prosperous African, Leveraging Technology and Innovation. And participants there concentrated on leaders for this year and dealing with some unpleasant realities in the role of being a leader.
The 2025 Africa Future Leadership Conference seeks to elicit thought-provoking conversations with leaders and potential leaders from all sectors of the economy. Youth participation is deemed very essential.
Africa sits at the threshold of historic opportunity. Our population is expanding. Our creative and entrepreneurial energy is unmatched, and our youths, over 60% of whom are under the age of 25, represent the most demographic asset in the whole world. Yet, our potential will only become prosperous or lead to prosperity if we make the right leadership a choice. So a prosperous Africa is therefore one where leadership inspires, technology empowers, and innovation transforms its people, its culture, and actually its policies.
More tips and inspiration from the panel session with emphasis on practical examples.
Consistency, value. If you do not bring consistency, value, and discipline to the table, nobody listens to you. So I ask you again, what is your point?
It's very easy to look outside and really think that there are no opportunities here, there's nothing to be done, there's no space for me here as a young person. And maybe my future lies outside the shores of Nigeria. And just like you said, I'm not against migration, for everyone to each his own. But the truth is, yes, you can go abroad and you can excel, you can become an alligator, right? But the truth is, it's a lot more harder. In Nigeria, we're an emerging economy, and there's opportunities everywhere because there's a lot of things that we need. And wherever there is a need, that need in itself presents an opportunity.
10 years after the initiative started, the African Future Leadership Conference, in collaboration with African Future Leadership Magazine, says it will continue to focus on its mission of youth empowerment and leadership development across the continent.
Welcome back. Let's talk stable coins now. Cryptocurrency seems to be getting the ears and eyes of a lot of people on the continent, and today we are also joining that conversation. And right here in the studio we have the Chief Executive Officer of PoliticsToday Labs. He is Shea right here. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here.
Great to have you. So a lot of people are talking about stable coins now, and we hear that even in Nigeria, small businesses are embracing and adopting it. People say it's because of cross-border fees. Tell us more about that.
I mean, stablecoins are changing the narratives around remittances, cross-border payments, and even trade, right? There's lots of restrictions if you live in Nigeria on the kinds of cross-border payments that you can make, on the people you can trade with, the people you can receive payments from. And stablecoins are just fully permissionless rails to receive and trade with anyone, anywhere in the world. But of course, this comes with a set of own issues, right? There's pros and cons for everything. A big con of this is that, like, these stablecoins are mostly dollar-denominated stablecoins. So the accelerated adoption of these stablecoins is also accelerated dollarization of major economies.
Yeah, so you seem to be asking for it to be pegged to local currencies. I think I've had conversation about stablecoin pegged to the naira also.
Yes, of course. We would like to see more stablecoins that are pegged to local fiat currencies. And there are advantages for this, right? So first off, cost of remittances go down because these stablecoin rails don't charge, exorbitant, fees for payments. We see the likes of 8 to 15% in traditional remittance rails, whereas with stablecoins, you just pay your transaction fee on the blockchain and you can pay anyone, anywhere. At the same time,
and any amount, I believe.
And any amount, absolutely. And of course, you don't have anyone calling you, where did you get all this money from, and why are you making these payments? Of course, stablecoins also put the local fiat currencies on the blockchain where they can be accessed by the entire world. So rather than demand for dollar going up because people want to trade with Nigeria, actually demand for naira goes up because people want to trade with Nigeria. So we can shift the narrative and shift the currency that is in demand just by issuing these local stablecoins.
So if it has this advantage, how come we are not doing it?
I obviously can't speak to this. I think our regulatory...
Well, who's supposed to push this in practical, apart from the talk, which everybody can talk about?
No, for sure. I think we need to have regulatory policies come from the CBN because they regulate all of the banking infrastructure, and really no major company or major bank is going to do something without the approval of the CBN. So I think our CBN regulatory policies need to catch up, especially with the US already putting in place significant stablecoin legislation like the Genius Act, the Big Beautiful Bill as well, which seeks to actually tokenize their entire treasury debt. So in the future, when you use dollar stablecoins, you're actually going to be using the US Treasury's debt. And this, of course, can be a huge issue because this debt, they can, of course, create as much debt as they want, and we then bear the brunt of this debt by just using these dollar stablecoins. But of course, it can also be positive for us because then we get to issue our debt as stablecoins on the blockchain.
So we know that in recent times, there's been a lot of conversations as to recognizing, the virtual assets. The new ISA, Investment and Securities Act, that recognizes it. We're hearing the lawmakers are talking about it. The Securities and Exchange Commission, they've also been loud about it. And I think about 2 weeks ago, President Bola Tinubu asked the judges, to get acquainted with blockchain and cryptocurrency. Do you think that perhaps we're going on that? Because countries like Kenya and Ghana, they've come out to set up their own framework and all of that about the operations of cryptocurrency. So do you see Nigeria, are we on the right track, do you think?
I think the moves by the SEC is definitely a move in the right direction, creating the necessary framework and policies for asset issuers. And we're not just talking about stablecoin assets, but also real-world assets. We're talking about stocks, Nigerian stocks on the blockchain. Extending the reach for these equities to become available on a global market. Even real estate as well, and all sorts of financial instruments, right? So I think the move by the SEC is in the right direction, but I think, we need CBN to also come out in favor of blockchains, because the reality is central banks all over the world are rapidly adopting blockchain technology. Just this morning, actually, we saw the Japanese central bank come out with their own stablecoin on the Ethereum blockchain. So at the risk of being late to the party, I think it's a good idea to start looking into these technologies now.
Yeah, but you know, the issue of trust also comes in when you want to deal with something new, anything new.
For sure.
So when you talk about virtual assets, blockchain, and all of that. And then every day, or almost every day, we do hear news of, there was a fraud carried out through blockchain, and so dealing with that trust issue would also be something.
So the reality is that the blockchains are the worst place to actually carry out any kind of fraud. I would say that, in fact, traditional banking, rails is the best place to carry out fraud, because on the blockchain, what you're doing is entirely public to the entire world. And we have companies like Chainalysis, which, to me, are a blockchain forensics lab that is working with the FBI. In my opinion, they're like a department of the FBI that is constantly surveilling the blockchain and tracking transactions as they move between accounts and they move between, exchanges and KYC'd institutions. So fraud is easily detectable on the blockchain. It's unfortunately why blockchains were created, is that so that finance can now be more transparent. And Chainalysis has been able to recover hundreds of millions of dollars in assets that were stolen and lost. Assets that were previously thought to have been lost forever, but through this forensics tracking on the blockchain, because it's open, they were able to actually recover these assets.
I guess the recovery is why people hear so much about fraud being carried out, on the blockchain, because eventually it comes out and everybody, this amount of money has been, fraudulently acquired. I
mean, you hear the U.S. government seizing, Bitcoin and assets on the blockchain every year, right? Like, so this is because these assets are being moved around in the public, and it's very hard to hide in the public.
So what's your company's, Nigeria, so what's your own?
Of course.
What's your company's play? What's your role in all of this? Why are you talking about this?
So my company, we are called Political Labs, and we're a blockchain research and development lab. We're the developers of Hyperbridge, which is a cross-chain bridge which allows assets and data to flow between isolated blockchain networks. You see, we see bridges as fundamental infrastructure for stablecoins. To give you an example, the top stablecoins in the world, USDC, USDT, they are issued on multiple blockchain networks. They're issued on Ethereum, Polygon, BNB chain, what have you. But then people want to be able to move these stablecoins across different networks for trade and for payments. And so bridges are actually what facilitate this movement securely between these networks. And so we've developed Hyperbridge, which is a new standard for cross-chain bridging. It's the most secure bridge in the world, which is also why we've been able to raise $5.6 million from foreign investors for our technology to develop and scale our technology. And we're now bringing this technology to local regulators and local issuers to leverage Hyperbridge to issue their stablecoins across multiple blockchain networks.
But this comes at a cost, I believe.
Actually, Hyperbridge is very cheap. It's very cheap to use and doesn't incur additional costs to issuers and to its users.
So how does this work? We hear some companies are now using stablecoins. So maybe you should paint a picture of how it really works. As someone wants to make a payment through stablecoin, then you do what? Where do you come in?
I think a very good user journey is, I want to send money back home. I'm living in the US, I'm living in Canada, what have you. I have US dollars in my bank. I could send my US dollars directly to a dumb account here and incur, of course, exorbitant remittance fees. Or I could send crypto and send the exact amount to the people back home, but now they're receiving dollars. This, of course, like I said, drives up dollarization. But what if there was already a Naira stablecoin on the blockchain where I can swap my dollars directly into Naira and I send those stablecoins back home? And because there's already this sort of synergy between stablecoin issuers and banks, the minute I receive those stablecoins on the blockchain, I can cash them out directly into my bank. And of course, wherever these stablecoins live, perhaps they live on a different blockchain, and the people back home are also residing on a different blockchain. Hyperbridge can be that link between these two blockchains to facilitate that transfer of value.
And I guess the most important message there would be the costs will be lower than if you were to send directly to, because
yeah, through traditional banking rails, the cost will be significantly lower.
But is this working now? Because we do not have stablecoin in local currency.
No, we don't. And this is why Chainalysis released a report last year showing that there's been over $600 billion in transaction volume that can be attributed to sub-Saharan Africa. And this is in stablecoins, in dollar-denominated stablecoins. So there's already huge demand. There's already huge traction for these stablecoins locally. But what we're trying to push for is actually to convert that volume and to convert that use case into local stablecoins.
All right. Well, I hope, individuals like yourself can push the narrative to have others have had this conversation, but obviously we haven't seen it yet, you know. And even though we had the in-era, we don't hear so much about that. You don't want to say anything, so we don't get ourselves into trouble. But when you look at what's happening on the continent, we see Kenya, we see Ghana. We're not even mentioning the UAE. Those guys, they've gone much far. What do you see in the area of adopting or adapting the new ways of payment and transfer that should, be beneficial to the continent?
For sure. So, in a world where every nation has its own local fiat stablecoins, I think we can actually do away completely with dollarization and the need for dollars to trade, between borders. We can have people be able to go from one local stablecoin to another local stablecoin directly without the need for this intermediary in between, which would usually be the dollar in this case. And this, of course, drives up capital efficiency, right? Because you're not paying these conversion fees to do these currency hops. And as well, I think it also makes capital more mobile. I can take my capital and go anywhere in Africa and be able to invest in whatever financial instruments are available there. And I can also send money back home as easily as sending a text message. So capital efficiency definitely goes up in terms of low fees and instant settlements. So, because time is also money.
Yeah, time is money. But if you want to do it intra-Africa, we still have our different currencies. Don't we still need a common medium of exchange on the continent?
So that's the beautiful thing about blockchain, is that you can actually have these applications on the blockchain that can allow you to swap between currencies seamlessly. So you wouldn't need an intermediary currency to go from one currency to the other. You can actually swap directly into the local CD. You can swap directly into the rand. You can swap directly into the shilling, the Kenyan shilling. And this would not require an intermediary currency at all, right? Creating more capital efficiency for both businesses and individuals alike.
Yeah, sounds interesting. And I know you're looking for a future where we'll have that in practicals.
I think that would be the best possible outcome.
So you can drive it.
Of course, we're trying to push this forward, and we're very open to talk to local policymakers, the CBN, working with them to create the right regulatory framework for these stablecoins and provide infrastructure to these stablecoin issuers as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I hope they hear you and they come for you on that. Thank you so much, Shea Lanlege, Chief Executive Officer of PoliticsToday Labs, for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's see what's happening in the global space. On the global space, we start from China, where industrial profits grew at their fastest pace in nearly 2 years in September, marking a second straight month of gains, as signaling long-awaited measures designed to curb overcapacity and rebalance the economy may be gaining traction. And top leaders in July vowed to take steps to tackle loss-making, inefficient firms, prompted by rising fears of entrenched deflation in the world's second-largest economy, driven by brutal price wars and weak domestic demands. And the U.S. President Donald Trump will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping this week as part of a trip to Asia. The world's top two economies seek to dial down tensions in the search of a trade deal that has so far been elusive to everyone. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says that last Thursday that Trump will meet his counterparts on October 30 on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation at that APEC summit. Still around the U.S. now, the Disability Awareness Council in the Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which assists individuals with disabilities in the community, offering aid ranging from transportation to housing advocacy. But we know those services have been on hold for now. The organization's director and board liaison notes that because of the shutdown and cut core disability services that people rely on every week are either paused, reduced, or running unpaid labor. As the standoff in Washington drags on, many nonprofits have lost access to federal grants and must take tough decisions about what aid they can offer and for how long. And HSBC Holdings is setting aside $1.1 billion for a lawsuit in Luxembourg connected to Bernard Madoff's Ponzi scheme. That's one of the largest financial frauds in U.S. history. The London-based bank said that one of its subsidiaries is defending a claim brought by Herald Fund. The claim seeks restitution of securities and cash related to the Bernard Madoff investment security fraud. And Australia's consumer watchdog has sued Microsoft, claiming that the tech giant misled 2.7 million customers by making it difficult to avoid paying for new artificial intelligence services. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission filed a case on Monday in federal court, alleging Microsoft failed to clearly inform existing Microsoft 365 subscribers how to opt out of paying for Copilot AI tools during subscription renewals. That's a huge money right there, but we'll see. And then moving on to another corporate, Toyota Motor Corp, they said that its global sales in September rose 3.1% from a year earlier, marking the 9th consecutive month of year-on-year gains. Global gains for the month, including Lexus brand, rose to 879,314 vehicles on the back of strong overseas demand for hybrid and sports utility models. And we close off in Thailand, where exports beat forecasts there with the fastest growth rate in more than 3 years in September after a surge in the U.S. shipment, prompting the Commerce Ministry to raise its export forecast for the whole of 2025. Export is a key driver for the Thai economy. Went up 19% in September from a year earlier. That's the fastest rate of growth in 42 months. That's it on Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'll see you at 1:30 during Business Incorporated. You'll get updates from the world of business. I'm John Mekwa. Make some money. We'll talk later.